Hey everyone, welcome. Just gonna give a couple minutes for everyone to join us now. Um, well, to start, really excited to have everyone here that's watching us from wherever you're watching us, whether that's YouTube or LinkedIn. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start this presentation. About 15, we're going to reserve 15 minutes at the very end for Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn. And then someone from our team will try to answer that question during the presentation, or we'll pick it up at the very end, and hopefully I can help address some of those. So today we have a very, very exciting topic. We've been super pumped to share about how we're cutting delivery times by 90%. That's a bold claim. And what I want to hopefully leave you with is the impression that we're on our way there. It's a very ambitious goal for us. And ultimately, this presentation is going to tackle some of the reasons why we're doing it and some of let's say, the tactics that we're deploying to be able to get there. So I'm going to move over to the presentation, and I'll give a quick introduction about myself. Cool. So the agenda for the presentation is going to be pretty simple. I'll intro a little bit about myself. We'll talk a bit about the background of the problem that we're trying to address here at Integrated Projects. We'll talk about how some important questions for us, which include how might we deliver on faster for our clients? How might we automate production along the way? And very importantly, how can you work with us in order to continue to enable that for the entire, let's say, AEC community ecosystem? And at the very end, we'll do some of the QA I mentioned. So to start, I'm George. I'm the one at the bottom holding my daughter. And I'm head of product here at Integrated Projects, helping on two fronts, both the platform and working alongside the machine learning team to enable some of what we're going to talk about today. A little bit of history. I was trained formally as a landscape architect and as an architect. And my career, I've had the fortune of working with really amazing companies, founders that are tackling a lot of very interesting challenges in AEC and beyond. Companies like Iris VR, WeWork, and Monograph. And in almost every instance, there's been this challenge of visualization, representation. And so I've been able to cut my teeth in some sense working on bringing to market very interesting BIM products that help to improve productivity across the industry, as well as getting, so let's say, hands dirty, deploying some of what we're talking about today on site at places like WeWork, working together with other folks to bring scan-to-BIM processes into these kind of build outs, as well as other use cases across all the way to even sales, which is kind of fascinating on its own. And then at Monograph, just really thinking about customer experiences and what does it mean to improve the way that we do very simple things on a very repetitive scale. And so you're going to see a little bit of that flavor here in today's conversation. So stepping way back and maybe elevating ourselves to a very high level, why are we here? Like, why is even integrated projects exist? I think that's a very important question for that we ask ourselves, and we've really honed in on this idea that apparently 80% of all U.S. building stock has out of date plans, and this actually kind of makes sense, right? The majority of buildings were built before the 1980s, and anyone that works in and around buildings has worked with something similar to this drawing, where very outdated, hard to know whether things are actually up to date. And so it's a huge challenge when you start to consider that we're moving more and more and more towards a let's say industry of renovation, and then not necessarily net new buildings. And so when we factor that in, well, that's a big problem, right? That how can we help improve all these buildings if we lack the material to do so? And so the folks that we work with, they face this challenge. Um, One of the ways in which you can accelerate, let's say, getting up to date plans is a type of service and type of process called scan-to-BIM. Now, many of you that are joining us probably have some idea of what this is. I think it's helpful for us to recap a little bit, just for for those that might not. But ultimately, scan-to-BIM is a way in which you can digitize a building. And what the benefits of it is ultimately that you can provide more accurate, uh, up to date plans for a customer, as well as some of the other things that come from being able to have a either a 2D or 3D or even a virtual tour of a project. So, real high level, what is scanning? Basically, scanning is the act of capturing 3D space using different technologies, one of which can be LiDAR or SLAM or some combination, and use that to generate ultimately a point cloud. Sometimes it can be some other type of, it can be represented differently as a mesh, but ultimately a point cloud is almost like the basic block of what you're trying to create. And then when we try to convert that to BIM, building information modeling, with more of a process than an actual outcome, it's typically a 3D model is what we're trying to say. That is typically done through a very manual process. And so that is, it's almost like tracing over that point cloud and trying to get as accurate as possible, deploying QA/QC strategies on top of that to ensure a high fidelity output. And so what we've done in integrated projects is we've basically taken a lot of these steps and have really focused on simplification. So, like, how do we take what was very complex coordination of actual people going on site, scanning this, passing it along, et cetera? That whole process, we've really simplified it for our clients down to three simple steps where they can scan this, so they can deploy us on site to scan. We then turn that, digitize that into a 3D model and 2D with 2D floor plans as well, and we then deliver that into a platform that also includes a virtual tour. Um, Part of along the way to being able to simplify that, there's a lot of things that had to happen. We had to also simplify for clients things that we what we call scope of work, or we call these kind of like scopes. Basically, grouping together similar elements that are associated with similar outcomes for customers, so that they can simplify their decision making. The built environment is very messy, so we've had to put in a lot of work into streamlining this for our customers. So we do that by giving them a simple menu of options, allowing them to, for interior and exterior purposes, select architecture scope, mechanical MEPF scope, and furniture scope even, and just define that. Right, we give our customers a very simple definition for these things, so it simplifies basically the process. And ultimately, when we're done with this, we deliver it in a viewer that's very easy, accessible, and it's meant to be shared. Right? I mean, we believe that this data is not as useful just isolated, siloed. It's actually very powerful when you're able to share it with stakeholders who don't have these tools. They don't have, in this case, typically Revit, which is the 3D model file format that we create these assets in. They don't have that, right? It's like these are expensive licenses. And so by giving it to them free, we unlock collaboration at the very earliest stages of design, which is in getting these kind of as built to the existing conditions of how things are today. Good news is that we've done this a lot. We've done this over 5,000 times now in the course of about 3 years. And we've learned a lot of things along the way. And not only have we done it that many times, we've also done a lot of different project types and sizes. So we've learned a lot about what it takes to deliver a great quality model, also at a scale that is pretty impressive. And so these are some of the kind of different, let's say, buckets of sizes that we've done work in. So now let's take a minute. Let's pretend we're in Jeopardy mode and we're at the daily double. And this is the answer to a question we want to answer. And this is very important because what we're going to do now is we're going to start to contextualize what we mean by delivery in general and the problems associated, like why even try to streamline delivery times. And it's because of this. And this is something that I think a lot of folks that order scan-to-BIM services feel. The feeling you get when you place an order for a service that has important downstream impacts on your project. The answer here is, what is order anxiety? And what I want to leave everyone with is that this is the kind of big idea that integrated projects is addressing and looking to solve for folks. And there's a lot of different variables that go into this anxiety. And one can think of it somewhat mathematically and say, well, anxiety is really more like a function of a couple of different inputs. One is like, how much time do you have to deliver something? What are the expectations that have been set in that delivery? And then ultimately, what are the kind of bottlenecks in the way that could act as obstacles between the expectations and the actual accomplishment of those expectations. And that, for a client, for someone that's trying to get these, let's say, updated plans to work on a project, which is typically the main outcome, and drive successful results for that project, for them, this equation is also tied to project planning. Basically, like, we know we need these as-built drawings, we know we need these up-to-date drawings because they're going to be the first step in a long process, right? Um, and along the way, they need to answer critical pieces of information, or they need to get critical pieces of information to answer these important questions that could have to do with tolerances, affordances, adjacencies, what's next to what, how much space do I have to do this or that, as well as ultimately, I think with at least with some of the things that we're doing, stakeholder alignment. By, at least in our case, by providing a very intuitive platform by which to view and engage and collaborate within, it helps to align other stakeholders who either don't have a lot of, let's say, uh, tacit knowledge about something that's happening within the space, or they don't want to travel very far, right? And they just want to understand, like, what is this product about, but they don't have a license for some of the specialized tools that someone in, let's say, in a construction firm or architecture office that's hiring us to kind of provide these assets together, that downstream client, or developer, et cetera, might not have that context. And so you can think of just multiple different stakeholders who face this type of challenge. And so then, if, like, order anxiety is this big thing that, let's say, is a supersedes a lot of how we look at delivery, well, how are we going about to lower that delivery time? And for us, it actually was taking an approach through three different lenses. Basically, one is the expectations. How do we set them? And how do we also maybe redefine the perception of progress for our customers? Um, the second that we'll talk about too is unlocking design teams to move faster. And design teams can also be those that work within, let's say, in the construction side, that are in the, let's say, pre-construction phase, where they just need answers in order to enable, et cetera. So that's one aspect. How do we unlock that community to move faster? The third one would be automation, right? What can we deploy that helps our teams move faster to push down the actual time? So if some of it has to do with, like, the perception, or rather the rate of change in which someone can actually get moving, this third one's actually just about real compression. So the traditional life of an order looks like this, and this is basically how we would have told you we're doing things even last year, right? You get a quote from us. We have there's a sign off for an order date. That order date happens. We mobilize. We then can provide a virtual tour or a point cloud to customers via a platform, and then between there and the very end of the delivery date, there's a lot of manual things happening with some proactive notifications, letting people know, hey, if there's some challenges happening, et cetera. Um, and, some automation happening there as well. But what that didn't change necessarily was the anxiety part, right? Like, anxiety is going to kick in because even with communication, you still have this kind of urgency to get the actual deliverable in hand, right? And so for us, the obvious question is, like, well, how do we actually help with this anxiety? To go back, right? We wanted to first start with expectations. And the first thing that this actually, probably the first innovation that this company really brought to bear was really thinking about, how do we set the right expectations from the very beginning on getting a quote. And why getting a quote? Well, it's at the very beginning almost that all this thing happens, right? Like, the whole order anxiety starts at the very start of, like, even before someone comes to us in some sense, right? The product is just started, an RFP gets sent out, people have to fill it out. And so the first thing that comes to mind is, like, who are we going to get the service from? We got to get some proposals, some bids, etc. And there's lag, right? That lag is real. And for us, the real critical thing was, like, well, how can we improve and simplify ordering such that it's not even a thing anymore? So I'm going to switch over here real quick so we can even just talk about what that means. So in IPX here, I'm going to exit out of here so you can see. So, like, this is the platform, but here, this little blue button here, right? We have an instant estimate tool. So we give you here, you can select from Scan It and BIMIT. Scan It would be kind of like what we talked about, end to end. We go and we deploy on site. I'm going to put in, going and demoing on this. Let's just pick an address. We'll just pick one. We'll just put test here. And the important part here is like we start to immediately give you a sense of what something might cost, right? So with just a couple of inputs, immediately we're giving you transparency and visibility. And we start to give you some sense of delivery time, right? So what this means is that you don't even have to talk to us to start to get a rough order of magnitude about when is this going to happen. You can start to pre-plan a little bit based off of the dates that you might have. And then you can kind of really quickly dial this in to just add number of space. You pick, again, we talked about simplicity, right? These things mean things, but ultimately what you know is that you also know when you can expect it. And there's a range for sure. And the range is critical because the built world is very messy and it's not like let's say it's not there's a real friction there, even with the real world, right? There's information that one might need to request, there's certain things that might come up, et cetera. And so by buffering some additional time, that at least sets the expectation that, hey, it's within this range. Now, that is not the end of that story. But anyway, the main point here is that from here, you start to get some insight as to what we'll deliver. And we do that also with BIMIT, which is our other service that just takes a point cloud, a customer might have and gives it to us. Now, the next something that's actually coming up now that we're going to be deploying relatively quickly, and we're very excited about, is more assistive quoting. This is kind of game changing for us because, the reality, going back to that idea, the real world is very messy, right? Sometimes it's not even as simple, right? Only certain projects really fit that bullseye target of some sense of being able to just answer through that simple self-service quote tool. Now, what happens when a client comes and says, hey, I need to actually scan a campus? So what we're doing now is actually creating a mechanism, a new quote tool, which allows you to manage all the complexity of the real world in a very simple and easy to use interface. And this is going to be rolled out internally with our solutions team. Essentially, when you jump on a call with us, we can actually on the spot start going through this and start giving you a quote immediately. I can't stress enough how important that is. But you can do something like, let's say there's 2 buildings, and this is, you're seeing a live demo here, so who knows if we'll break. But essentially what we can start to do is manage some of the expectations around how many floors. So let's say, sorry, here, there's 4 floors on here, there's 3 here. If I unwrap this, I can start to pick like the actual scope of work per floor. I can even go even further and say, add additional areas to this, and ultimately come back and get a real-time quote here for this price. I haven't moved any of the numbers here, but you'll start to see that pretty soon. We can start to give you not only the price itself, even as complicated as the order might be, but we'll be able to simplify that for you in just a matter of clicks, which is pretty game-changing for us. And I think it'll be very game-changing for our clients to be able to lean on that as a way to build their own quotes or compare RFPs to what we're offering. So that's one thing, right? It's about managing expectations. How do we help people manage that complexity sooner? Now, I'm going to jump over here real quick. Get back to slideshow. Now, okay, so that's the very beginning of the process. Now, how do we think about delivering value faster? Since that system is putting in place, we still have other things that we can do. And one way to do this is by redesigning the entire process. Now, one thing you might pick up from this presentation is that we are very methodical and very rigorous about the data that we track regarding our process. And to the point where like we really believe this could not be done without that kind of future forward data-driven approach to the service that we provide. And so what you're seeing here is how we're looking now at the process itself, and we're going to break it down for you. And we're very excited about this piece because not only is it about improving the perception of delivery time, meaning that if we actually break up this bigger problem into smaller pieces, you can then have more assurances of when you're going to get very specific things when you need it, as you need it in some sense. And then we're also going to unlock speed on our client side so they can get moving faster. Because the important thing here is about answering, again, these critical questions sooner. And so what does this mean? That means breaking down our traditional process into one where we can answer very simple questions. With our virtual tour, we kind of already answer this question of what does the space look like? How, with a new segmented point cloud, which we'll talk about in a bit, we can then start to give you like rough order calculations on actual objects in a space. Moving forward, we can also give you initial backgrounds to help you with just very simple, like answering critical questions very early on to get your design teams running. And in tandem, we're also working on the architecture scope, the MEP scope, and furniture scope, if one so chooses to pick all those different scopes at once. But this kind of more sequential and progressive way of delivering our service is what we now call fast track delivery. And it's available today by default on any order above 10,000 square feet that happens through engaging with us. And what this means now is not only do you get a virtual tour, but you don't just get a point cloud, you will get a segmented point cloud, which for those that are much more technical, that just means that you will now have about 15 different types of categorical point clouds to allow you to remove information you don't need. So if you wanted to continue to like understand an area of the project without extraneous information, you can. Core backgrounds, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the rest of the scopes will be just delivered more progressively and sequentially, as opposed to, waiting till the whole pizza's cooked at the end before you can eat it. Here, you'll be able to eat slices at a time, for those that are very hungry. And so what that might look like now is all this more sequential. The core background model is a very new type of model for us that we're going to be delivering sooner. It's actually been informed by working with our customers. And really designing ourselves to meet their needs, right? So with the core background model, you get everything as before. You get an RCS model with that, Revit model, DWGs, as well as a very limited set of scopes, including exterior walls, columns, a grid for those columns as they exist in the space, from what it's been determined, the floors themselves, and then levels, right? And so these, in talking to our customers, these things early on help to unlock a lot of information, including like floor to floor heights. What is the actual floor to floor heights of a space, so that we can understand if certain elements can be brought in, all critical information to be done, to be used further. And so it's this reframing in some sense about delivery times to be about not one delivery time, but multiple delivery times, allows us to unlock useful data, right? The time to useful data for our customers down to 90%. So like what would have taken, for us, things kind of scale exponentially as the size of a per square foot, but now being able to compress that is massive, right? Now people can get started from really quickly. We've been doing this in a somewhat ad hoc way, but we've now systematically designed it so that it's now part of all these orders. And at the same time, that systematic approach doesn't sacrifice quality or consistency, which is very critical for our customers as well, right? The point of these models is that they have they abide by a certain set of standards and quality and accuracy, so that someone can do something with them at the end of the day. And so this is just kind of an example of like how we have very rigorous standards with our own execution plans that we use and enforce, as well as the constant iteration that we do. So this is just a kind of whiteboard screenshot of like what's upcoming, right? And I think that is, very few services look at themselves as a product such that they roadmap the actual improvements that they're going to be delivering for our customers. And that's a key thing to consider here. And so now we talked a little bit about expectation setting. We talked a little bit about, let's say, some of this kind of reframing about the problem, how to get value to our customers faster. The third thing, right, is now automation. So it's like, okay, well, how can we actually like time-based actually change things as well from just the core production side of what we're doing? And big question came for us, and Jose, who's our CEO founder, he had the foresight early on to think about the service in a different, unique way, which is very compelling. It's like, at a certain scale, we have enough information to leverage that information to do very cool things. And so the question here is like, how do we now take the data that we have and leverage it in a very anonymized way such that we can provide value back to our customers. And the important thing here was from the get-go about scope. So in two senses, one was like defining our own scope of work for what this would mean, and then picking a scope in which that would work. And so we defined it through the lens of architecture scope, which, just statistically speaking, because we offer a menu of options, it's 100% of all orders is like, architecture scope. So you make a radical impact on architectural scope, you make a radical impact on the rest of our services, just from that. And what needed to be true was also a set of clear definitions around what is this thing that we're doing. Like, so in order to unlock fast track and especially with automation, certain things need to be true about what we're trying to automate. And so that came to a selection of what were the elements that we're going to try to automate in its creation. What was the different standards, LOD 200, LOA 220, at least, because we understood that if we automated certain things, we still had a kind of a team that can take certain automations and manipulate them into the right location. And then other things had to be true, being able to get this back in at least one day from this automation, like certain things. And it's interesting because I'm sort of teasing around the actual solution in a way by what I'm framing. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is something that we call First Draft. And it's currently in its alpha stage, which I'll talk a little bit about. But it's a huge shout out to the team that I get to work with across what we call BIM operations, which, if you're an AEC, that's a very interesting title that we would love to talk more about if you'll have us to talk over lunch. But we have BIM operations and we have machine learning operations, and the incredible team has been cracking the code on this in a really revolutionary way, to the point where we believe fundamentally, both in academia and in the private markets, that we are the only pipeline of its kind to be able to do what we're doing at the scale in which we can do it at. And so at the level of quality that we can do it at. And so we can ingest a point cloud, right? Convert it into one of these, what we call a segmented point cloud, where it identifies from the point cloud, what are the roofs, what are the walls, the toilets, cabinetry, etc., and then use that information also to create a 3D model, right, in Revit. And if you follow myself or other people on the team, you might have seen some of this being shared or talked about through our channels. But just to kind of give you some evidence of what that looks like, here is basically what we call First Draft is really the combination of these two things. It's not just the 3D model. With the 3D segmented point cloud, we believe even that alone can accelerate modeling times by helping teams remove some of the noise that they might have from the scope of work that they have. But ultimately, these two things are what you're going to hear a lot about this year. And the acceleration of the quality of this output, you could see there's still some finesse that needs to happen from this to here, but that this can accelerate modeling time, it's proven. I mean, we have, and we'll talk about what proof means in a bit. But fortunately, we also have really great testers who are also stress testing this and exposing some of its limits today. But all this to say is, like, we're very excited about the progress. And progress for us means a couple of things. Like, we have to, again, like as I mentioned, we are very data driven. We very much look at everything from a metrics and goal oriented approach. So we have a couple of North Star metrics for this endeavor itself, and it ladders up all the way back to this idea of order anxiety. But even at the granular level of what we're trying to accomplish with First Draft is moving the needles on at least two metrics with what we call a counter metric to make sure it's keeping us honest. And one is time per square foot. So this is how rigorous we are with our services, is that we're able to tell you from across all of our projects, what is the actual time per square foot it takes us to do something. And that is the North Star metric we use to compare the work that we're doing with First Draft relative to any augmentations that have to be done today with our modeling team, or how they kind of like take it from the crust, the ball, to use the pizza. I'm pretty hungry. Use that pizza analogy, right? Take that ball of dough and actually start to form it into the pizza, or whatever level that is, right? How done is it? That's the metric that we're using to understand whether we're having a positive impact. In addition to that, time to what we call first submission. Basically, this is the time from when a modeler starts working on a project and when that product has been delivered to our internal QA QC team. And so how fast are they now able to do that is another measure and again, this is all just through the assistive things that we're doing here. Are we helping the modeling teams be more effective is critical. And then from there, we also have this counter metric, which is to say, sure, this can all be good, but if we're just, this whole idea of like garbage in, garbage out, if we're just, slinging bad things over faster, is that good? No, we have to also reduce what we call revisions, which is when we receive feedback, when QAQC looks over a model and provides feedback back to the modeling team about things that need to be updated, how many times is that happening? And we need to keep that number low because we also know things about the impact that that has on time for us. We're, again, we can go even later about how scientific we are, but even with early tests, and this is what got us really excited last year was that we started to do these early tests around. I'll just play this video here. Excuse all the simple commercial here, but essentially, given two timestamps where we had someone actually model this thing manually versus having, and again, this was the very early version of this. So this was in an actual Revit plugin, which is not what our customer, our alpha testers see today. But this auto generated all the walls, doors, windows within that model. And again, if it's a matter of just like taking that first draft, like people do with GPT today, right, or like Chat GPT, right? It's a lot of it's about a first draft that you then go back and edit. Being able to take this to this in again, I mean, just to cut to the chase, 47. In this case, now it's even faster because a lot happens in the cloud, so you really have to bake in sort of the wait time. But all that, right? It's pretty amazing, and so if we go back to this, well, the good news is that we are hitting our thresholds for what we believe need to be the case for our modeling teams to use this. And if I go back one slide, sorry, this number here, I believe at least within our internal operations, we're significantly lower already than this within the architecture scope, right? So we have to even be that rigorous to say, within architecture scope, how are we accelerating that isolated from how is it impacting MEP and furniture scopes? But anyway, all this to say is that like the gain on time and efficiency is really powerful for our team. Now, talking a little bit about the roadmap for this and how we accelerate this. As you saw, that was Q3 of last year. We since have launched the alpha pilot with select testers that have been basically breaking the pipeline for us on our behalf. And so it helps us to kind of fix the resiliency of it, et cetera. But all that to say is that that's been a really great experience to be able to work with a lot of these folks to send us, incredibly large. We're now able to process, because of this, models that are 50 gigs, which is kind of insane. Again, all through the cloud very easily. And then for this quarter, we've been focusing on is that more that telemetry and observability. Something we didn't talk about today, but is very important to us is this idea of recall, which is to say, if you compared BIMIT First Draft with an actual handcrafted model, what is the delta between the two from a geometry perspective? Like, are we detecting all the walls is the question we're trying to answer. And that you'll see more from us over time, almost as like an industry benchmark to establish that, like, how fast are we growing in that realm? And so the more that we get to 100%, obviously, the better. In Q2, what you're going to start to see from us, and we didn't talk too much about the elements right now, but essentially it's walls, doors, windows, columns, floors, levels. You're going to start to see more elements roll out. So we already have tested internally that we can do things like toilets, cabinetry, more plumbing fixtures of different types, sinks. So by the end of the year, we should be making a dent, hopefully, in this kind of the holy grail in some sense of MEP. All right. So just taking a quick stock, I think we're getting good on time. So we kind of to recap, right? It's like we take this process that now is a lot faster. And we're starting to compress it and ultimately get to, hopefully 90% delivery times in different ways. And so maybe to kind of recap a little bit, if to play Jeopardy again, another daily double. Um, the mission here ultimately is that we're the platform and service that helps AEC teams drive better project outcomes from the start. So no more anxiety dogs here. We are actually delivering a great experience for our customers and ultimately their clients who depend on this information just as much as our customers do. And so, who is our customer set? Who works with us currently? We have different channel partners. We work directly with hardware companies to support them. We also work across different industries, from automotive to industrial, as well as companies like Acom Tishman and HLW, to provide support for their projects. And again, deliver it in a very intuitive and easy to use way. So, in short, hopefully that what we covered today wasn't, I'm a pretty fast talker, so hopefully it was some time to marinate on it. But if I leave you with anything, it would be, let's fast track your project, your next one. Very simple, right? We can just look to identify what a potential next project might be, give you that quote up front, make sure we can cover all the bases that you're looking for. Ideally, from that, we can institute a first draft delivery once we go to work on that project together, along with BIMIT First Draft. So you can also get a taste for what that looks like. And then, as part of every project, we like to have a project success ROI meeting. So at the very minimum, you'll be able to see and have tangible evidence that you can take to other folks, that you need to, whether it's your clients or stakeholders, et cetera, something that you can roll into outcomes for your own project. And so there's a QR code there where you can meet with our solutions team. And if you're lucky, you can meet with Jose himself, which is always a great conversation about the future of the industry. And so, if you have any questions with our team, feel free to connect. What I'll do now is maybe move over to some questions that may be racking up. Let's see here. Okay. I'm new to this platform, so okay, cool. Let's give it any kind of minutes. Happy to answer any questions. All right. Well, we'll see how it goes. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, Scott. Thanks very much. We appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here trying to figure out the little bit of the chat here. There you go. Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. Just really excited to work with all of you. I mean, I think ultimately, like, we are in great question, Scott. Yeah, is Fast Track available now? Yes. No, it's available now on every order. We're starting to get some questions coming. There you go. Awesome. Okay, so for First Track, yeah, it's available now on any order over 10,000 square feet. Please feel free to talk to our solutions team on your next project about it. And yeah, there's some other improvements that we're making too into the platform as well. So the kind of pizza tracker that we have in it, which I didn't get to show too much about, but we're now updating that as well. So even this kind of fast track delivery will be reflected in there as well, and that should be coming about in the next week or so. But even then, right now, it's available. Darren asks on the first draft, about how much of the point cloud does it draw out? So taken from just the elements that we talked about, walls, doors, windows, the hit rate, let's say, on the point cloud itself. Could be about 80%. I would feel confident about saying 80. There are still some false positives and some false negatives, but we're rolling out a new strategy in a very short amount of time that again should increase that recall number significantly. And so I think on wall, like in aggregate, it's about 80, but let's say taken on walls, I think we ran a recent test where it was about 65% was a recall from like a finished model. And so there's some work to do, but I think even then, the rate at which we're implementing these updates is pretty crazy. Tyler, when are you planning to start rolling out MEP? That's already rolled out, so we can start rolling that out. Oh, if we're talking about fast track, that should be by the end of the year. We should have some inroads on that. Not to say too much about the pipeline itself, but basically, like we can increase. It's a trivial to identify new types of geometry. What's a little bit maybe more of a bottleneck is actually doing that conversion into Revit itself. So happy to speak more about that in depth on a one-on-one call. And are you able to quote pre-scanning? Pre-scanning. If you're by pre-scanning, if feel free to add more information on that one, and maybe I can. But if I understand it to be pre-scanning being, let's say, setting up controls and things like that, that's now we're basically including things like that as part of our scanning service over 30,000 square feet. Basically, there's almost no point in trying to scan sometimes a building that's larger than that, because the amount of drift that could happen in some of these, depending on the hardware, it's just not worth the risk. It's much better to just be methodical, and giving the customers the option to opt out of that is more important, I think, than sort of giving the option to opt in. Because as many of you know that work in scan-to-BIM, not many people know the value of controls. I think a lot of this technology is still new for people, and you kind of have to walk them through it, and sometimes in a more explicit way. Question from Scott: does the fast track early deliverable include basic GC? Yes. So that early deliverable does also go through a QA QC process, and so that's also baked into this. Paul, great. Yes, interested on the MEP side. We are too. We know that's a huge, that for us is like, champagne all around. Once we hit that, we'll invite you to the party, Paul. Primary duct. Yeah, no, it would include primary duct and pipework. Actually, plumbing can be even sooner. Plumbing fixtures can be much sooner if we're talking about like bathroom, things like that. What file types and point cloud density? Great questions, Yuli. So file types right now that we can process are XYZ and E57 inside of a zip file. The zip file is just it's probably better for file transfer in general, but yeah, that's part of it. So we can do XYZ and E57. And then in terms of point cloud density, we haven't had too many issues. If anything, what we've seen is that more point cloud density takes longer. It's just more of a longer time to upload. It does improve performance a bit, but not by much. Something more important might be color-based point clouds versus grayscale. Color does better because a lot of our own training set is colorized. However, interestingly enough, we haven't seen necessarily a negative impact because it's grayscale. We just prefer that it would be color because we can be assured that that's a better input. Let's see if there's anything else. Great. Well, again, I appreciate everyone who's taking the time to connect with us, who's taking the time to give feedback. If you're in the crowd here, give feedback on BIMIT First Draft. Thank you for breaking it. It's important that in these early ways we can do this. Oh, we have another question. Is it possible to join your network of scanning service providers? Yes, Eric, please reach out. Reach out to us and we can connect you to the right people. Actually, you can reach out. So I'm sure maybe someone in the chat can give you an email from our team to reach out to for that. But yes, absolutely possible. Um, at any rate, if there's any other questions that we can help answer along the way, please reach out. Let us know. We're always looking to work with folks who are um, very interested in improving process and how can we do things a lot better and innovate and change and bring about some real useful solutions to the industry. So thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Please feel free to reach out to us, book a call with our team, and